Welcome to the Fast Break Podcast. We're your hosts, Ari Betterly, Ryan Costello, and Sam Elster for the Hoosier Network. We have so much to break down as Indiana just returned from their West Coast trip, facing both Oregon and Washington University. Both things need to be unpacked, so let's just dive right in. I'm going to start us off with a lovely quote from Terry Morin saying, we're ready to come home. It's been a long 6 days. So, Sam, let's start with Oregon. What does
Yeah.
that mean?
Yeah, I mean, the Oregon game to start off, it was a pretty hard watch, I can't lie. Both teams were very slow to start on offense. I think the first quarter was like 11-9 score. Like neither offense could really get going. And while the Hoosiers they came out strong, but Terry wanted, them to really come out with high energy. She's been saying that for a while. They did for the first like 2 or 3 minutes, but then they just could not make a shot. And then second quarter came around. Peyton Scott for Oregon couldn't miss. Finished the first half with 10 points, 6 rebounds, and the offense was just super inconsistent on both sides. And then towards the end, third quarter, Hoosiers build a 10-point lead. Everything's looking pretty good, and then all of a sudden Oregon creeps back, and turnovers just became such a big issue, and no one could knock down a shot. Yarden struggled. Chloe Moore McNeil struggled. Sydney Parrish struggled. Only person that seemed to be consistently giving points is Caroline, who finished with 14 points and 5 rebounds. And we talked about it last podcast how Filipina Key was going to be such a big worry, but she honestly wasn't that much. I think Caroline did a great job, stopping her in the paint and everything, and actually turned it to Ehis Etut, who actually was dominating. She's a freshman who was having her own night in the paint, 9 points, 8 rebounds, but she really took over in the third and fourth quarter, which then led to the final minutes where IU was turnover heavy. 6 turnovers in the fourth quarter as a whole.
Oh my goodness.
4 turnovers in the last 3 minutes and 56 seconds, which led to Oregon ultimately winning. The turnovers in that fourth quarter were just super sloppy. It was literally Chloe Orshea just trying to communicate who was going to be the point guard, setting up the plays, and then all of a sudden, Peyton Scott would just snag it right out of their hands, and it was just easy baskets.
It's just so confusing that this is like still a problem. Like it made sense. Harvard, one of the first couple games, but now you're this deep into the season, and with a team that has so much experience like Indiana has, it's just head scratching that they have those problems like some games.
Yeah.
It was hard to watch.
Yeah, I was going to agree with that, how Terry Morin kind of instilled this message that this team just needed time to gel together and that it was a new team, but it's an experienced team and they're going to figure it out. And now I think we're to the point in the season that I'm not sure it can be that anymore. And I think Terry Morin knows that, but it's nice little water bottle clink, right?
ASMR.
Yes, love it. But I think it's to the point where it's like you can't really bring up that answer anymore. It's about what is this chemistry like on this team?
Mm-hmm.
Where's the consistency lie on this team? And why are these turnovers and things that keep being brought up to be fixed keep happening?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, Terry Morin kept on talking about just like the points off turnovers. 18 points off of turnovers. IU had a complete of 17 turnovers. And, as a fan just watching from home and it's like, midnight on like the East Coast and, they're just getting the ball snagged left and right. It was hard to watch.
That was something, now transitioning to their past game against Washington, that they really seemed to kind of solve in the first quarter, and they were converting off of Washington's turnovers. It was, I think, 8-0 after the first quarter with points off turnovers. IU was leading in that, so it seemed like they had solved that. And then we get into the second quarter, and all of those problems kind of just come back, and that was how Washington was able to take the lead. But the reason IU was able to get the win was Yarden's career night. She had a career high 35 points and 8 made threes, and that was the most points by an IU player since 2018. So she just popped off, and like Terry has said in some of her press conferences, you just need to keep shooting and keep feeding into each other. Chloe Moore McNeil says you need to feed into the people that are struggling, and she popped off, and so did Sydney Parrish, who was 4 of 6 from 3, and Sydney had that 3 right at the end of the game that really helped push them over, and then the game sealing bucket was from Yarden, and just topping off that great night that she had already had.
This kind of reminds me of the 2 games at home prior. It was kind of like that game against, was it Illinois,
Yeah.
where the same kind of issues seemed to happen with Oregon. They couldn't finish the game. They couldn't break that gap and wager a win. But then they had a quick turnaround, and then they were, playing much better the game 2 days later. So it's kind of interesting how it's like after they have a little break, it seems like things seem to slow down with the turnovers and
Yeah.
the things we've honed in on. But then after that, it's like, oh, there's a great night from Yarden Garzon. There's a great night from Cindy Parrish. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I think there must have been something said or some kind of message in the locker room because they come out in the third quarter and they have probably, I would say, their best offensive quarter of the entire season.
Yeah.
They shoot a blistering 83%, score
Wow.
30 points, and it looked like this was going to be a 20 to 30 point win, but then they continued to let Washington creep back in the fourth quarter, and it took those great shots from their leaders or their starters and Yarden and Sydney to really push them over the limit. And I think the reason Washington was able to creep back in was because they had such a dominant presence in the paint all night. They scored 22 more points than Indiana did in the paint, and that kind of is just a trend we've seen the entire season with the front court just being a liability.
Yeah, I think it's just a really big issue of them not being able to play a full game. It's, it's either they're doing great on offense, but then can't hold the other team while they're on defense. And I think that's just going to be a very big issue. We've seen it against the top-ranked teams, UCLA and USC, where they just can't finish and play a complete game on both ends, which is just going to be an issue.
And I think that will, and not only the rest of the conference play, but once you get into potentially Big Ten tournament or into Big Ten tournament, most likely, and potentially the NCAA tournament, that's something that could just kill your chances of going far at all.
Right. Especially like on the road, it's really important to get those wins because every team in the Big Ten are looking to clutch those at-home wins that are very important. But if you can't seal the deal at least once away, which, I mean, they ended up doing that with Washington, but it was definitely earned. It makes it hard to believe, like, are they going to be in the tournament or not? But who's to say? There's
This
still
is
a lot
one
of
the
games to go. Yeah.
that they needed to win. If they lost this and it was 4 straight, the first time in 6 years that they would have had done that, I think it would be really a bleak outlook because that long losing streak. But at least from that long West Coast trip, they get one. So maybe that can help push them through the rest of conference play since that was the halfway point. They have 9 more games. So.
Right. And now they're going to come back home, play 2 games at home, which I think will be very nice for Terry Morin and the rest of the group to be back in Indiana, to be back on their home court, back with their fans, which they rely so heavily upon. And some of these big matchups we've seen, and these close matchups between like UCLA and USC. But now they're playing Nebraska this upcoming weekend. This team is lights out from the three-point line, and Indiana's kind of have to really guard them from the perimeter. They have some star players that Indiana's also going to have to guard pretty heavily, which we've seen, I think, with a lot of these Big Ten teams that, they have their star players, but Indiana's covered them well, but they're going to have to do extremely well. I also think that, they're going to have to really eliminate these turnovers in this upcoming game and really utilize the consistency they've built from Yarden and Parrish these past 2 games to see if they can kind of, just like you said, Ryan, just keep climbing up and making this an acceleration rather than going downhill again. What are your kind of thoughts for this Nebraska game? I know I kind of mentioned some points, but
I think the biggest thing for me is Alexis Markowski.
Yeah.
We've seen in the past couple years them have some trouble with her, and especially with the problems that have been in the front court. That's something I look at because she just moved into second place all time in rebounds at Nebraska. So she's someone that's just going to be gritty and trying to get that and a terror on the glass. So it's something that I bet they're going to be preaching this week in practice. And you don't want to drop 4 straight at home. They haven't done that since before Terry Morin became head coach. So that I feel like is something that might be preached a little bit.
Yeah, I think honestly when we were talking about the how Nebraska is the second best 3-point shooting percentage in the conference, I think that it reminds me a lot of when we were talking about before the Stanford game when IU really was struggling with their perimeter defense. And I think that this is also going to be something that Terry Morin's going to really dig into her players this week is, defending the perimeter, defending even the paint for Markowski and all that. I think that she's going to really use the time because it's Tuesday now, games on Sunday. They got a lot of time to prep.
Yeah, they have some well-deserved rest and some time to regroup as a team. And I bet these on-the-road stretches are very hard for all these Big Ten teams. I can't imagine, having to change time zones and get accustomed to playing. I mean, I'm sure in the other direction. I'm sure those West Coast teams struggle too coming here. It's definitely an exhausting road stretch for teams, but I'm hoping that Indiana, kind of regroups themselves and take that win they just had and keep climbing. But yeah.
I think one thing they can use with confidence is Washington was the best 3-point shooting team in the conference
Right.
statistically, and they did a decent job on them. So I think they can carry over that confidence of how they performed defending that part of the game at least into this game.
Yeah, totally. I mean, honestly, I think that after the winning 3 straight games at home, I think Terry Morin is not going to let her team lose a 4th straight at home. Like, I just think that after these past just losing games, I think that she's really going to light a fire under everyone.
Also because
Oh yeah.
like the tradition of this program, like
Yeah.
if you look at like the stat, like they haven't lost 4 straight since the 2012-2013 season.
Crazy.
Yeah.
All the players that are on the team were probably in like elementary school, middle school at that time.
Yeah.
So
Imagine your coach saying, "So this team hasn't lost 4 straight at home
your
since
program,
since you were this tall.
Yeah.
and since I've been coach,
Since she's been coach,
so
right?"
I just don't think for the prestige or like how they've built their program up that's something that's gonna be something top of mind.
Definitely.
I will come to IU's defense. I mean, they did play 2 very hard teams, 2 top 5
Yeah.
teams in the country, and they kept up with them. Although they didn't win, they didn't seal it. I would say that they actually were in it the entire way. So,
Mhm.
I mean, at least it wasn't blowouts at home. At least it wasn't that, but I agree. It's still lost in
Yeah.
the losing chart. So, moving on, do we want to do some hot topics today, Ryan?
I'm ready to
All
jump right in.
right.
So Indiana kind of helped, or they did help themselves yesterday or on Monday night by getting their win against Washington. But I would still say they are on the bubble as of right now, and that's something you don't want to be come March, come tournament time
Right.
when deciding and being left out
Terry
or not.
Morin doesn't want that.
No, they don't want that at all. So what do you guys think Indiana needs to do to move out of this conversation and be comfortable come March?
Yeah, honestly, I think just an overall change in the mindset. We came in and understanding that this is a new team and everything, but we're now halfway through Big Ten play, and they need to lock in together as a team. Like, I understand, new team, all of that, players aren't used to playing these roles, but we now are more than halfway through the entire season, and this team should know how to play basketball with one
Mhm.
another. And as challenging as it is, and road games are challenging, it shouldn't get to a point where they're getting blown out on their own home court. So I just ultimately think that the mindset of every player, coach, fan, even just all needs to change. And honestly, like just go into the next half of Big Ten play, knowing that they need to be winning more.
Yeah.
Ari, what about you?
Yeah, kind of building off that, I feel like there's kind of 3 keys here we keep mentioning
Mhm.
over and over again every podcast. It's the turnovers. You got to limit those, especially off the perimeter. You got to make sure that these other teams aren't getting shots from around the 3-pointer, because if they do, then that's detrimental to their success on the court. 2, the leaders need to step up and be consistent, because yes, they're great leaders. We've seen Chloe Moore McNeil have great moments. Same with Sydney Parrish. Same with Yarden Garzon this past game. But now it's like time to put the puzzle pieces together and do this every single game. I get that some players are going to have a night. They're going to go off. Let them shoot the ball. That's what we've been saying. But I think if they all collectively worked together and did that every single game, we would see a different outcome in some of these close battles where they lose in the 4th quarter and they can't come back and they can't climb back. Where's that, that fight, that last finishing effort to, cross the finish line and get the win? 3, I think this depth is lacking on this team. I think, you have some players that come off the bench potentially, like a Juliana Lamandola or a Henna Sandvik, and they're not really producing a lot of points for the Hoosiers. You have the 7 players we keep talking about, and they're played constantly, which is fine, but they get tired and it's apparent and it's obvious. So if those other players like Henna, for example, who's had moments, same with Juliana, or Jules, comes on the court and starts producing more for the Hoosiers, I think that could help with some of this fatigue that maybe we're seeing in the 4th quarter.
I think it's interesting how the bench has just shrunk because, like you said, you saw success out of both of them. And Jules, when she stepped in the starting lineup while Sydney was out. So it's just been kind of head scratching a little bit about why not use that when you do have people that are capable. But my my takeaway or my point for this question is they just need to keep winning games, plain and simple.
That's a great point.
I mean, that's very simplified, but like when when Ohio State comes into Bloomington, that's a good quality. They're ranked high in the net. Get that win. Get Maryland when they come. Nebraska. You need to just pick up against these quality opponents, because then when it comes time when they're looking at one team and then Indiana, if Indiana has those great wins, then they'll get in. But if they don't have those great wins, then that's an easy way to just toss them to the side, which is
Right.
harsh, but it's true. You need to lock in.
You need to lock in.
Yeah.
I like how you said that. Strap in, Hoosiers.
Strap in, exactly.
Yes. All right. Are you ready for the other question?
Yes. And then,
Yes.
like I mentioned earlier in the podcast, it is the halfway point of the Big Ten season. So where do you guys think the Hoosiers will finish, and with what record? Ari, I'll go to you first.
Okay, this may be a little pessimistic, and I want to believe in these Hoosiers, and I want to say that they are going to have a great finish to the season, going 6-3 or 7-2. But from the way that things have been right now, I think they go 9-9. I think that they have some of these lower tier wins with like a Minnesota, and then like a Purdue in there, a couple other teams maybe. But then when you get to those difficult matchups like the Ohio State, the Marylands, and even like maybe a Michigan State, those are going to be a little questionable in my opinion. I think, especially when you're on the road for Michigan and Michigan State, it's been hard for the Hoosiers to win on the road. And then when you have teams that are ranked opponents like Ohio State and Maryland, who just are aggressive and quick and they're rebounding off the glass, I don't know if Indiana's going to be able to pull it together, but I hope they do. I hope they prove me wrong. But what about you guys?
I honestly think that they just need to win out the next 3 games. They're playing Nebraska, Rutgers, and Minnesota. 2 at home, 1 away. I think winning out of those 3 is really going to boost the confidence before they go to Michigan or play against Ohio State. But I think that they're going to go, honestly, like, win out those 3. And I think it's really going to depend on if they win out those 3, how they're going to then go from the next part. Because I think that this team does know what's at stake, but at the same time, they do need to lock in, and they do need to realize what's
Quote of the day.
Yeah, literally,
Quote of the day
what's
is
going to happen.
lock in.
But I think that they'll finish 11-7 on the for Big Ten. I think that they're going to understand what's at stake here. I think that the veteran players like Chloe Moore-McNeil, like Sydney Parrish, like even Caroline Strickland, who's been around, college basketball for a while, I think that they're going to have a really big influence, and I think that maybe the game against the losing streaks with, Oregon, USC, UCLA, Illinois, and then the win against Washington, I think maybe it'll give them a wake-up call.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with your optimistic view. I think, Ari, yours is more of a real view based on the way this team has been. Like, I think that's more...
I didn't want to do it. I really didn't, but I had
feel
to
bad,
throw
but
that opinion out there.
I feel like
It's okay.
that's more... like the way we've seen this team that they'll go, but I'm gonna stay optimistic like Sam, and I
love
think
that. I love optimism though.
I feel like it proves me right too many times. But I think this team, especially with having people like Yarden Garzon, Chloe Moore-McNeil, Sydney Parrish, people that have won a Big Ten championship. Not saying that they're gonna go and do that, but that know what it's like to win in the Big Ten. I feel like, especially with having 5 of those 9 games at home, I think they'll lock in and they'll finish 11-7. But I think they will struggle against an Ohio State potentially, and then like you said, Michigan or Michigan State on the road.
Yeah. I agree with what you said though. Like those 5 home games are detrimental to their performance. Yes. The Hoosiers play so well together. I mean, obviously we've seen a lot of flaws, but like when they're in Assembly Hall and when they have their fans, who are so loud in Assembly Hall, I think that's their like 6th man on the floor. So if they have that, it could prove me wrong. It could definitely.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
We will see.
Yeah, I mean they're lucky to have like those. Like they play Ohio State at home, Maryland at home, 2 more ranked teams in the Big Ten. So hopefully that could be an advantage. I think winning out at home for the rest of the season in conference play would be huge.
It would be.
I think at the last episode we do, or whenever the season ends, or whenever the Big Ten season ends, we get like a little video and we play that, and we'll see.
We
Who
like
is
put a little
right?
clip
Who
of
is
who is
right?
right. I love this.
Yes.
So remember your
Totally.
predictions. Well, you guys had the
Yes.
same basically.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
11 and
Yeah.
7,
But
and then 9
yours
and
is
9.
yes.
Yeah.
So we'll
Watch
see.
it be right in the middle, be 10 and 8. So
Oh,
watch. I'm
perfect.
kidding.
Mm.
Well, guys, it's been an awesome episode talking all about, Hoosier Hoops on the Fast Break podcast. I'm Ari Betterly here with Ryan Costello and Sam Elster for the Hoosier Network, and we will catch you next week when there's so much more to talk about after this Nebraska game, potentially Rutgers, and we will see you next time.